All right, more Young Turks interviews at the RNC. Okay, now, we had a Democrat last time, Tim Ryan. I largely agree with him. You know, he's been on the show many times. Now we got Abhay Patel. He's running for Senate. He's a Republican. This is going to be fun. Okay, so first off, tell us about the race.
Sure.
And what the context of the race is.
Absolutely. So David Vitter, who's a sitting senator, ran for governor of Louisiana, lost in a runoff in December, and that evening decided and announced that he was not going to run for re-election. And so that opened up the race. Now, Louisiana is a unique state in a lot of ways. We have what's called a jungle primary. So there's no party primary system. Everybody's on the ballot come November. And the top two of any party go into the runoff.
Okay, so David Vitter ran for governor, didn't make it, so he's out, and you're stepping in. How many folks are in that primary who are Republicans like you?
Yeah, there's 6 Republicans, announced Republicans in the race. There's 4 Democrats and independents, so it's a large field.
Okay, and what makes you stand out? You're relatively young. You're 40.
Yep.
Right. What makes you stand out from the 5 other Republicans, let alone the Democrats?
Sure. Look, I'm the only one in this race. It's not a career politician. I've never been in office, never run for office. My entire career has been in business and finance and economic development. I think that outsider's perspective, energy, spirit, I think that's something we need in Washington. It doesn't matter what ideological spectrum you fall on, whether it's the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, in layers in between. I think we can all agree that Washington's not working. I think if we keep sending the same folks up there, we continue to get the same thing. I think we need somebody that brings a different energy and a different perspective.
It's not like a young South Asian politician in Louisiana hasn't worked before.
Yeah, that's right.
What is it? I mean, why is every South Asian politician in the country in Louisiana?
We've got one in South Carolina too.
That's true. That's true. Nikki Haley. That's right.
So they've done well. They've done well in the South. I'll tell you this. So there's a lot of Indians who my parents are from India, settled in the rural South. It's a part of the country that is very familiar to Indian immigrants. Similar values, similar principles. Hardworking, family values. India and America have a lot of things in common. I mean, America is obviously the strongest, oldest democracy in the world. India is the largest, and I think it's an area of the country that they're very comfortable in.
Well, so I was telling you before we got started, I grew up in Central Jersey, which means that approximately 50% of my friends are Indian.
Yeah.
But almost all of them are Democrats.
Yeah.
Was it that you guys grew up in the South that makes you more Republican? Why are all the politicians that are of Indian descent Republicans?
Yeah, it's a great question. Now we've had a couple of Democrats run in the South as well, so I think there's been a mix. I mean, the 2 that have been most successful have been Republican. I can't answer for the other candidates. I'll tell you, for me, I went to law school a decade and a half ago in 2003, and I went in what we call in the South the Blue Dog Democrat, but came out a limited government Republican. And for me, it was studying under Gary Lawson, who's a founding member of the Federalist Society, and taking constitutional law courses, reading the founding documents. For me, just understanding what the founders envisioned with respect to the limited role of the federal government, local empowerment, local solutions for local problems. That's what makes me a Republican and a committed member of that wing of the party.
So that's interesting, Abhay, because I had the exact opposite reaction. Because I grew up a liberal Republican in New Jersey, and then I went to law school, Federalist Society, same exact thing.
Did you really?
And not on that day, but later. Kind of walked out with my hair on fire. Now, that doesn't apply to you.
Yeah, that's right.
Or maybe it already happened to you.
Maybe I lost it. No, I didn't.
Okay. Like, I remember, now this is not fair to everybody in the Federalist Society, but it was like a warning sign to me, a red flag for me. Some guy in the parking lot approached me and started talking about the Council of Zion. And I was like, ooh, like, this is not the right room for me.
Yeah.
And then I remember other friends telling me, look, man, if you're a liberal Republican and you care about, you're conservative fiscally, et cetera, you're not in the right room, because you're in the room at the time with Strom Thurmond and Trent Lott and Jesse Helms. Yeah. Isn't that concerning to you that the Republican Party has a history of not being very welcoming to minorities?
I disagree. I mean, I think we're the big tent party. I mean, if you look at our principles, we're the only party whose base grows when we move folks from lower income to middle income, from middle income to upper income. We're the party that I think connects with immigrants. I mean, I can speak personally, having parents.
Except for the fact that your standard bearer now hates immigrants and wants to ban a quarter of the world from coming into this country.
Yeah, I don't think that he hates immigrants. I think he said repeatedly that he loves immigrants, that he understands that our country is.
But you know that's laughable. You know that.
No, he has. Look, he made a comment on. He has said that about immigrants. I don't think anybody. I can tell you this. I would not support a candidate that I believe hated one of the inherent values of our country, which is bringing people in from all over that share our values and our principles. I don't believe that he hates immigrants. I don't think he said that he hates immigrants. He has made some statements. Hold on.
Okay,
I can understand where he's made a couple of statements that might be that might lead some folks that want to believe that's what his position is. But I don't think that's true. And just yesterday, what he said is instead of having a religious test, we ought to have a security test. And I think that's a plausible position, given that we're actively fighting a war.
No, that's a nonsense position. Of course we have a security test. We have an 18-month security test before refugees can come into the country. We have the strictest security test in the world. No, he's not talking about that. He said Muslims. He meant Muslims. Every once in a while he gets embarrassed because some donors go, hey, remember we have rich Muslim donors too. And he goes, I didn't mean Muslims. And then he calls, Latin American immigrants coming in, criminals and rapists, and wants to build a giant wall. Abhay, I know you're a Republican. You got to run as a Republican, but you're not going to win that argument. I don't see an overwhelming majority of the immigrants in this country going, oh, yeah, Donald Trump's so inviting.
Yeah, look, I think there's I was at a breakfast this morning with the Republican Hindu Coalition. They're strong supporters of the Republican Party and Donald Trump. And I think you're seeing minority groups from across the country. Let's see what the demographics end up looking like in November. I think Trump's going to do a lot better than people realize. Again, if I thought that Donald Trump hated all immigrants or all people that weren't similar, there's a lot of people that wouldn't support him. I just don't think any of us believe that. Has he been inartful at time in the way he's talked about some of these issues? Sure, but he's not as, he hasn't been doing this for 30 years like a lot of people. He's not a polished, appellate litigator like some folks on both sides of the aisles are. He hasn't been in the, in the Senate and the House debating all the time. So maybe he said some things in a way that he would change. That's okay.
I love the word inartful. Whenever you screw up, it's inartful. But both sides do that. Both Democrats
Absolutely.
and Republicans use that word. But anyway, so now let's talk about why you're a conservative.
Yeah.
So I assume it's for fiscal reasons. You worked in Wall Street, right?
I did.
Yeah. So now I used to be a fiscal conservative, and I still am. But I want to balance budgets. Republicans never balance budgets.
Yeah.
That
was a plank of the Contract for America, by the way.
Yeah, but they never did it. So
we did balance the budget in the 90s.
No. First of all, Bill Clinton was the president. Now
he was the president.
Yeah. Now at the same time, if you want to say, hey, look, he worked with Republicans in Congress,
absolutely,
and they reached an agreement. Fair enough.
Absolutely.
But no Republican president since Eisenhower has left office with a balanced budget. And Bush devastated the budget with not only the wars, but also the tax cuts. So you guys say it stimulates the economy, but it never does. All it leaves us is with a giant deficit.
My thesis in law school, it's a great point, and I think we can have an entire episode on this topic alone. First and foremost, I don't think there's anyone out there that comes from my wing of the party that would tell you that our party has let us down as much as anybody. And I think that's why you're seeing a lot of the frustration in the Republican Party that you see. Federal spending is the cause of budgetary
of our issues. It's all the tax cuts that's the cause. It costs trillions of dollars to give to all the rich people in the country more tax cuts that they never needed in the first place.
We have $19 trillion.
That, by the way, they keep 95% of only putting 5% back in, circulate into the economy.
By the way, we can't. You're not going to tax your way out of $19 trillion of debt. You can only attack federal spending. And when you talk about George Bush, look, I wrote my thesis in law school under Professor Gary Lawson, and it was on the role of the federal spending. I think that's where the federal government, I don't think there's any question, that's where the federal government gets its power. It goes all the way back to the New Deal. Here's what I would suggest, though, is that I wrote that thesis in 2006. George W. Bush was president then. I've been as tough a critic on George W. Bush, and I think lots of Republicans were critics of his when it came to federal spending. And I think if you go back,
that's not how I remember it in 2006.
I can tell you that I was certainly someone who was disappointed. I think a lot of people were. It may not have been a majority of the party, but I think a number of folks that identify themselves as conservatives were loud critics. And if you go back, even not just on the fiscal side, I think if you go back to the invasion of Iraq, reading editorials back then, and you'll see that some of the loudest critics in that war were folks that were identify as conservatives and not Wilsonian liberals.
So it's relatively easy to do it now, but let me just
Yeah.
make sure I understand you.
Yeah.
Iraq war disaster. We should have never gone in.
I don't think there's any question about that.
Okay.
We're fighting we're in endless wars today, and it's one of the reasons I think that Hillary Clinton is, in my opinion, not in any position to be the president of the United States. Hillary Clinton voted for the war. A lot of people did. A number of people on both sides of the aisle since then have taken it back and said, "Hey, that was a mistake." Fair enough. Hillary Clinton had a do-over when it came to Libya. I don't want to make this about Benghazi, and I don't want to make this about the email servers. Let's just talk about the philosophical decision to remove Gaddafi and go into Libya. Now we're in that war. Now that is the type of mentality, this idea that it is our role as a country to remove evil people in their positions, create a vacuum, and just hope that a less evil person replaces them. That's the kind of decision making, I think, on the foreign policy perspective that we can afford.
So that's a fair debate. One of my top issues with the Republican Party is that you unleash the neoconservatives on us, and upon the world, and that's a plague upon the world.
Thank you for using that term. I tell people all the time, I'm not a neoconservative. I'm not a compassionate conservative. I'm not a paleo conservative. I'm a conservative. Conservative means a limited federal government. It means restraint at home and restraint abroad. That doesn't mean we shouldn't lead. Of course we have a role to lead, but I think the overreach internationally, I think overreach domestically, I think it's the reason we're in the mess we're in.
So I can go topic by topic, and it would be very interesting. But I want to. So what you said about foreign policy, really interesting. Liked it. That's a good, fair conversation. I want to do one last thing on the topic we started on, just so people can have a good enough sense of where you stand.
Sure.
So now you say you can't tax your way out of it. That's a talking point. The reality is, both sides of the equation are relevant, taxing and spending.
Yep.
So now, in reality, taxes, effective tax rate in America is among the lower ones there, especially compared to Europe, way low. Okay, and so there's a lot of room to actually increase taxes. And in fact, some of the best economic times in American history has been with far greater taxes. Okay, but when you say, so I'd like you to address that as well. But when you say we cut spending, you know that you cannot cut spending enough to get rid of all the deficits, because it's not realistic. Cutting foreign aid, it's a nickel and a dime. It's not a real thing.
No doubt.
Okay, so tell me why you think that
you have to have a combo. I think you and I can both agree that let's just pick a arbitrarily very high number, a 95% marginal tax rate, probably not a good idea.
So
we agree with that. Just work with me here for a second.
Okay, I can't, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Real quick, I'll try to make this point.
Okay.
Now, to me, that sounds outrageously high. 70% sounds outrageously high.
That's right.
Right, but the reality is, actually, the best economic times in America in the 1950s and 60s, we had a 91% highest marginal tax rate, and then for almost all of that time, above 70%. So I look at that evidence and I go, wow, I'm surprised by how well the economy did when we had incredibly high tax rates for the highest marginal rate.
So let me, if you'll concede me 1 point, I'll concede you the other extreme. Right. A 0% tax rate doesn't work either. The other extreme doesn't work. So the question is, where is it in that middle ground?
That's
that works?
Exactly right. Okay.
And I think it's about approaching taxes and understanding taxes at the individual level and at the corporate level. I think that individuals, my parents owned a small business. We grew up in a small independent motel in Mississippi. It was 14 units. We charged not what a lot of the hotels in this town are charging, right? A lump sum of the rooms wouldn't get to that point. So you can do the math on what that meant for us. I mean, that was our job. We were the maintenance staff. We cleaned the rooms. We rented the rooms. We lived in the rooms. For a small business like that, if you could give small business like that, like my parents, when they continued to own a small business, more money they would invest. They could grow the economy. I believe that individuals, when you give them more capital, I think they'll do two things. 3, really. 1, I think they'll save. 2, though, I think they'll invest. And 3, I think they'll make great charitable donations. That's at the individual level. And then at the corporate level, look, my entire career has been in advising CEOs and CFOs. Some of the world's leading companies. I worked in New York during 2 downturns, 9/11 and the Great Recession. I've seen firsthand what companies will do when you give them access to more capital. whether that's organically grown or from the capital markets. They invest. Companies, by definition, don't reach a static point and decide, hey, we're not going to grow anymore. Their mission is to grow the economy, to grow jobs, and to develop. And I think small businesses,
That's not their mission. Their mission is to
it's
maximize profits.
But how do you do that? You do that.
You
by
don't
growing.
necessarily do it by growing the economy or adding more jobs.
You do it by growing. You do it by growing.
By growing your own
though.
profits.
You do it by growing your company, though, for sure. And that trickles down to the bottom line, right? If you're able to grow revenues, if you're able to incorporate technologies to get better margin, if you're able to have better tax policies when it comes to capital expenditures, you put that right back in your company and you grow your business. When you grow your business, you grow jobs. When you grow jobs, you grow the economy. On the other end, small business entrepreneurship. Look, I've been leading for most of the last several years economic development, along with a great team at the state and regional level, economic development for New Orleans. New Orleans, as we all know, was hit by a terrible storm, Katrina, and it is one of the great economic turnaround stories of our time. If you come to New Orleans, and I invite you to come down with me, and we'll walk around and spend a few days. I don't know if you spent time there, but I'll show you conservatism at work. And what I mean by that word is this. I'll show you community activism. I'll show you public-private partnerships. I'll show you local solutions for local problems working. We're hailed as America's great startup city. We're hailed as ground zero for education reform. I mean, this is when a community says, you know what? We've tried it the other way for a long, long time. They failed us. Let's take it into our own control. New Orleans, to me, doesn't have a single Republican elected. Which is amazing because they've been leaning on principles of limited government, local empowerment, local control for the last decade to help turn the city around. I hope that I'm in a position one day to help my Democratic friends understand that the things that they're working on every day in education and economic development and growing jobs and innovation and entrepreneurship and private industry, access to capital, all those things are ideas of the Republican Party. And one by one, we'll get them turned, and we'll get you back.
Well, that would be a hell of a thing. Look, I think this has been a really fair conversation. We obviously disagree on what those level of taxes should be and what the level of spending should be and what we should spend it on. But there are some agreements as well. So I really appreciated it. Abhay Patel running for U.S. Senate in Louisiana in an open primary. So good luck, and we appreciate you coming on the Young Turks.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it. All right.